Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Collegian Football Podcast. In person, finally, as we are back at Penn State. Alexis, how's it feel to be back?
It's very exciting. You know, I was taking classes from home all of last year, so I didn't get to spend much time up at University Park, but I'm excited to be back, have all my classes in person, and ready to get another year in of bettering myself from a journalism standpoint and getting into Beaver Stadium for the first time as a media member.
There you go. It was pretty cool to see, just over the last couple days. Campus is packed. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's awesome. I mean, last year you would walk around, and it was a ghost town, and you would just be walking anywhere, whether it was the class or just get something to eat, and it didn't feel like Penn State. And just being able to have that back, even just these last couple of days, has been really cool, honestly, to see. And it has that feel of what it did 2 years ago and all those years before. So that's really awesome. But, of course, I mean, the last step is to get football back. And
Absolutely.
that's got to come. It's coming soon. And that'll get the buzz back even more. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And we are actually heading to Beaver Stadium tonight to speak with Coach James Franklin and tight ends coach Howell and Brenton Strange, as well as Jaquan Brisker. So I'm very excited to see what they have to say to us today. I mean, there's been no shortage of big news, big events being dropped on us lately from Penn State football. So I'm excited to see what they're going to say and how team's been looking. I mean, it's getting close to game time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just mentioned it. Covering Penn State football last year, everything was on Zoom. We didn't get to see practice like we're going to tonight. We didn't get to get the feel for James Franklin in person. But now being able to do that, it's, I think, going to allow us to just cover the team better and, of course, just get that human interaction that you can't replace with Zoom, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start off, we're going to discuss a big event that occurred this week. Justin, you want to intro to that?
Yeah, of course. So yesterday, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 officially announced their alliances. The commissioners, Kevin Warren of the Big Ten, Jim Phillips of the ACC, and George Klajokovic of the Pac-12 all got on a Zoom call and basically hashed out, what this alliance is going to look like, as obviously a result of the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma to the conference starting in 2025. This is something that seemed like a retaliation type move. Obviously, with the SEC adding those two teams, they have 16 teams, and that's the most for any conference in the country over the Big Ten and all the other conferences we just named. So I guess the next step for those for the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 was to make a move where they could get some power, get some voting power. And now they have a potential 41-team alliance that is looking like it's going to come to fruition. So that is something that's going to have incredible shockwaves in the future of not just college football, but college athletics itself. I mean, they've talked about the impacts for basketball and even for some sports like gymnastics and other things like that.
Yeah, this is obviously a groundbreaking event. Nothing like this has ever been done before. And, when Texas and other team is escaping me right now, but when they announced that they're going to join the SEC, I was, thinking these teams are kind of the top dog in the Big 12. Like, what is that conference going to amount to now? And then, the SEC, obviously you just said that they're going to be growing. So I like how you said that this is kind of a retaliation move by these three conferences to get some power back. And, this is a big way to do it. And I'm really interested to see, how this is going to affect teams, not only football, as you mentioned, this is going to affect teams in every single sport in college athletics. So I think some things that we need to look at, especially with conference schedules, non-conference games, like that's all going to be shaken up. And I'm very interested to see, what the financial impacts are going to be, what the recruiting impacts are going to be, because a lot of players that are going through their recruiting journeys, we've heard it from Penn State football players recently, that home plays a big part in where you decide to attend college. And if you have a scholarship offer that's close to home, then that's obviously going to hold more weight. So if these players can get like games, say if you're from California and Penn State would end up playing, Stanford or somebody like that, then that might be beneficial to Penn State it's recruiting.
100%. I also think I liked everything you said, but I think one of the biggest parts of this alliance is that it was almost very vague when they described it yesterday. And just saying they haven't signed a contract. They haven't signed an agreement. They said it was 3 gentlemen, of course, with the 41 schools also on board. Basically just saying, look, here's what we want to accomplish as a whole. And this is absolutely, I know we already touched on it, absolutely a direct move at the SEC. But it has so many greater impacts, as they described it, with the recruiting, like you said, but also with things like college football playoff expansion and even things like TV rights as well, which this isn't going to be something that happens overnight or over one season. Like we said, Oklahoma and Texas don't even enter the SEC until 2025. Yeah. But we're going to start to see, the impacts kind of ripple down. And like you said, how cool would it be to get those type of matchups like a Penn State Stanford or a Penn State Cal or even like a Penn State Florida State? And this just has only benefits to it. So I don't think that the non-signing of a document or a contract is going to, I don't think things are going to blow up in their face. But it is interesting to see that this is just something they agreed on and that they were ready to, share with the world and have this pretty much prepared to definitely go into place at some point in probably the next 5 years.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they're making it very vague and abstract at this point to give themselves more time to have communications with, as you said before, 41 universities involved in this deal. That's not a short task. That's very tall task. Lots of communication that's going to go into that. And as you said, Oklahoma and Texas aren't joining the SEC until 2025. Is that going to be how long this takes for us to get something in paper, something in writing to say, hey, this is an alliance. This is what it's going to be for the future of our universities, our conferences. And yeah, I almost wonder if it's going to play into the recruiting game now, almost immediately. Like we're well aware that Penn State has pipelines in Florida, in Michigan, at all these schools in Pennsylvania. What's going to be the effects of that? It's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and I could see it was discussed yesterday in the press conference, but of course, like everything, they were pretty vague with it and left it open for, change and interpretation. But I wouldn't be shocked to see an eventual change to an 8-game conference schedule, instead of a 9, just because scheduling that extra Pac-12 ACC matchup that's just going to draw so much interest, not only from players and coaches and recruits, but as a fan. Come on, that's awesome.
Just as a college football fan, if you follow the top teams such as Clemson, such as Alabama, and you want to follow those games, that's going to drive huge TV traffic and huge social media traffic. So this is all, they're going to have to take all of this into account.
I just even remember as a kid just watching those SEC at 3:30 matchups, and those were the best games in the country. They were. The SEC, obviously they tout themselves the way they do as being the best conference, and they very well may be, but that was always the best game of every week. And now you put a Penn State, Clemson, or an Ohio State, USC at that time. People want to watch that. That's awesome. That's just good for the sport. It's not even just good for these teams. And so that's why there's just no way that this is going to be something that falls through. And I think they feel really confident with this going forward. But, I'll ask you, there's one conference left. We got the Big 12 still. We don't really know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I think it's very possible that, they reach out to, some lower level teams in some of these conferences, such as a Rutgers, such as a Maryland, where they may not be, they're strong in other sports, but in football, we know that they're not the best by any means. So that's always a possibility. Recruiting from other schools, say, hey, look at this competition level. Maybe you could get, some pickup in recruiting if you join us. And yeah, I think that's very possible. I think it's also possible that they dissolve. That's a very realistic possibility.
Wow. That would be crazy. Just like a Power 5 conference just dissolving like that. But they did say yesterday during the press conference that, the Big 12 is an important conference to this country.
Absolutely.
They still, even without Texas and Oklahoma eventually, they have Baylor, Texas Tech. I mean, not just for football, but Kansas for basketball.
Yep.
Huge programs that are essential to the college sports
Absolutely.
landscape. And they're going to have to find something to do with these teams. And could they potentially join this alliance or join the SEC or even join some mid-conference major conferences? Then they have a lot of options. And I think they're kind of going to let everything play out a little bit.
Absolutely.
And then, I guess, evaluate what would be best for them. But they're not going to – the teams aren't going to go anywhere, obviously. So they're going to have to do something here with these 10 teams. And whether it happens tomorrow or whether it happens next year, there's going to be rippling effects throughout the country and all the conferences.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people are wondering about, especially with this alliance that was just announced. They're going to have to, come up with some sort of statement, some sort of release that says, this is where we're at. These are the options that we're examining, not only with just football, but with our other sports. As you said, they're strong in basketball, strong in all these other sports. So they're going to have to come up with a solution. As you said, it's not going to happen overnight, but, somehow in the next couple months, I think they're going to need to announce something.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to touch on before we move on a little bit is something fun I was just thinking of. What matchups do you want to see out of this? I know we're about 5-6 years out here.
Yes.
What do we want?
I think from a Penn State standpoint, I really want to look at the Pac-12 because there's a lot of teams that Penn State is familiar with in the Pac-12. I mean, going up against Washington in recent history, USC, a couple of classic Rose Bowl games in recent memory. So I think both of those teams, would be great matchups for Penn State. And if we're looking at new teams, Stanford's produced absolutely amazing talent in the last NFL level first round talent in the last couple of seasons. So that would be a good one too. And of course, you can't forget about Oregon. I think that would also be a great matchup.
That would be awesome.
And looking at the ACC, I think we both agree on this one. We don't want to see another Penn State Pitt matchup coming out of this. We've seen too much of that. Is it always a good game? Absolutely. No matter where it is, fan base is always wild. That's a big game that people want to tune into. But wouldn't you rather see Penn State play against Clemson or, Florida State, some of those teams?
I think it was Ben Jones from StateCollege.com tweeted it the other day. He was like, if they can play all these teams and they have another Pitt matchup, you're just wasting it. And I was like so in agreement with that because you have all these really cool programs that you never get to play. Like we just talked about some of them, like a Clemson, Florida State out of the ACC, even like an Arizona State or Utah out of the Pac-12. You have so many options. And I think it would just be a waste. Could we just be done with like the Pitt rivalry? I mean, I know it used to be a bit that
was
rivalry.
A big thing.
It used to be a bit of rivalry back in the day, but I mean, come on now. You just said they're good games. Like, the people show out and everything.
Absolutely.
But are they really good games besides that one at Beaver Stadium where it was kind of close a couple years ago?
Yeah.
It's just we've used that rivalry.
Yeah.
Come on, it's time to move on now.
Yeah. Let's not forget that we were supposed to see Penn State play Virginia Tech.
Absolutely.
Before, COVID happened and non-conference games were canceled. I think that's a matchup that people would love to see. So
absolutely,
that's a good one to keep in mind as well.
They got options.
Absolutely. All right, I think we're going to move on from that. So we're going to take a look at Penn State's defense and one of their top leaders. I think that we could both agree on that. Jaquan Brisker was named an AP second-team All-American, and rightfully so. He's earned this from his performance last season, his leadership this offseason, and coaches are really high on him. There's no shortage of good things that they say about Jaquan Brisker, and he says that he's not gonna pay attention to all the hype. It's about what's happening this season. He's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He could have went to the draft, but these seniors, they say they don't want to go out like they did last season, and I'm excited to see how his leadership develops this season.
Yeah. I know you and I got the pleasure of speaking to Jaquan at Media Day, and he really reminds me the way he talks. He reminds me of Jahan Dotson a lot, the way he talked, especially before last year, where he was starting to get some of that national attention. But he's a quiet leader in the sense that he's going to show everyone how to do things by what he does on the field. He doesn't need to start screaming at everybody and start being a leader in that sense. He's going to lead by example. And the All-American nod is so, like you said, so worth giving to him. And he has just been absolutely essential for this team. And he's going to be absolutely critical for them because at the safety spot, you have Jair Brown, who is going to be in that starting role, for the first time this year. And having someone like a Jaquan who you can rely on all the time is going to be huge for them. And he's one of their playmakers undoubtedly. And for a defense that lost Adisa Isaac recently, they're going to need all the playmaking that they can get. And if he can continue the role he was on last year, especially in nickel and inside the box when he was in there, he was an absolute force. Like, he was just dominant.
Yeah.
And if he can continue that pace, that NFL, not deciding to go to the NFL could be worth it because he has the potential to become, a high-round draft pick. So we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, absolutely no doubt with that one. If he shows out this season, he's gonna be in the top to be, a top draft pick. And there's a couple guys that have been through some tough years with this team, especially last season, but they're going to have to step up as leaders. We just talked about Jaquan Brisker. PJ Mustipher and Brendan Smith are two other guys that, they have a lot of collegiate and successful, for them personally, successful collegiate seasons. So they're going to have to take charge, Mustipher on the line, Smith at the linebacker position. There's leaders in every group, but there's also a lot of youth and inexperience. So they're going to have to pick up the slack.
Yeah, to me, Brandon Smith's got to be that guy. And I have a feeling that he's going to be able to step up to the challenge. But there has been so much shifting within that defense over the past year. And just new players coming in. You have Ebikete and Tangelo coming in as transfers. He needs to be the rock of that defense. And him being able to use that athleticism and use that aggressive nature that he did last year, that's got to set the tone for Brent Pry's defense. And having him and having Brisker and, like you said, also PJ Mustipher, who's a veteran of this group, they're going to have to set the tone for everybody. And whether or not they want to or not, they're the leaders of this defense. And they, like we've talked about for weeks now, they have no time to get adjusted to the season. They're at Wisconsin. They're at home to start the year against the defending conference champion, and then you have the whiteout. So they have no time right now. They have to be fixing all the nooks and crannies in practice, and they have to be effective week one, or else they're going to get trampled, and they could easily start, 1 and 2. And they're going to have to set the tone, and that's just how it's going to have to be for them.
Absolutely. And we talked about Arnold Ebikete, AK as they like to call him, and Derek Tangelo. They're not experienced when it comes to working under Penn State and their coaching staff, but they have collegiate experience. And Arnold Ebikete, he got some conference recognition in the AAC when he was with Temple, and his teammates have had amazing things to say about him. That, for a guy his size, they say off the edge, he's aggressive, he's fast, he's agile. And that's something that they're going to need. Derek Tangelo, great things to say about him as well. So I'm intrigued to see how they contribute from, an on-field production standpoint. But at the same time, they have that experience. They have the ability to become leaders in this group. Are they at the caliber that the three people that we mentioned before are from a Penn State standpoint? No. But they could be some role players as leaders as well.
How thankful do you think James Franklin is that he got Ebikete before he knew about the Adisa Isaac injury? I mean, they'd be in trouble.
I think he's thanking his lucky stars right now that they hit the transfer portal as hard as they did. And, even with Isaac in this group, if he wasn't injured, it's always good to have, some backups should somebody go down mid-season.
Yeah, it is just such a shame, though. He was everyone's breakout candidate person.
Yeah, and I think we were really looking forward to seeing what he could do.
Yeah, absolutely. You saw the flashes at the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the exact details haven't come out about his injury, of course, but, you hope for the sake of the program he has a speedy recovery because he was someone who was expected to make an impact. But now you have these veterans with the guys returning from Penn State and the transfers as well. They're going to have to groom the guys that are playing as well, the Nick Tarburtons of the world, the Curtis Jacobs of the world. They're going to have to step up as well, and it's going to be the veterans' job to help bring them along too, because going from pretty much a role where you're getting less than 10 snaps a game to being thrusted into this position in a year where there's been as tumultuous as ever with everything with COVID and all the stuff with that, they're going to have to really rely on those veterans, and getting them up to speed is going to be really important because, again, no time. They got at Wisconsin week 1, so that'll be interesting to see, and we'll see if they can help them along.
Absolutely. And we talk about returners on defense. The offense is packed with probably two of the deepest groups on this entire team with the wide receivers and the running backs. There's just no excuse for lack of leadership, lack of production this season for either of these groups. We have countless returners on both groups. There's just no excuses this season.
Yeah, I think we saw everything we needed to last year with a depleted running back group that still was able to really produce at the end of the season. Now they get back your Noah Kane and you bring in John Lovett, and that's gonna be a really exciting group to watch. And Penn State's, of course, been known over the last 5-10 years, the James Franklin era, for developing into an RBU type school, but this is different. This isn't your typical running back room where you have your star and then your role players. If 5 very qualified running backs to be able to play on any drive they would need them to. And we know they on media day that Yersich talked about only playing 3 of them per week. Again, I'll say it, to me that would just be such a mistake because you can't get film and prepare for everybody and on any specific drive, on third downs. And being able to rotate them in and out, that would be huge for them. And I have a feeling that's what they'll do. I feel like he maybe wasn't telling the whole truth, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, we're taking it for what it is right now. Yersich and Sider, running backs coach, he echoed pretty much the same thing. They're on the same page with this, with playing 3 at the most 4 running backs per game, switching them out for whatever series that they would like them to play. But I'll agree with you. It would be a huge disappointment to, see one of these quality running backs not seeing any time in one single game. But, then there's also, should somebody go down with injury again, this group has obviously been plagued by injuries over the last 2 years. So, it's going to be interesting to see. And that competition in that room is only going to make them better. So you can trust that whatever running back they're going to put out on the field each week, they're going to deliver. They're going to perform to the best of their ability because there's really no excuse at this point.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned Juwan Sider. I've been seeing a lot of, buzz around Juwan Sider nationally for, I think, the first time. And you can put this on the record. He's going to be a college football head coach, I think, within the next 5 to 10 years.
You heard it here first. This is Justin's bold prediction of this week's episode.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing him all over Twitter, all over all social media. Just people are recognizing not only how crucial of a running backs coach he is and how much he does for the offense, but we've mentioned it before, his recruiting has been pivotal for this team, especially in the state of Florida where he's from. And if he continues to be able to get all these connections and continues to obviously do wonders with this running back group, which he's done, creating the whole Lawn Boys culture and everything like that, there's no reason why he's not going to fly. And he's super young. He's energetic. We've talked to him last week after practice. He's one of the cooler coaches to talk to on the team just about football. And it's really hard not to gravitate towards him once you speak to him. So that's my bold prediction for the week.
Absolutely.
Like
I could see it, but you could just tell that the players are also excited. Look how, as we just talked about, 5 quality running backs in this room. It takes a lot of persuasion, I'm sure, and a bunch of different qualities that keep quality players like these in a program that's so packed with talent. And I think that speaks volume to his coaching abilities, his ability to, address their needs off the football field as well. Those are things that are important, not only, when they're playing games, not only in practice, but in life in general. And that speaks volume to what he's done for this program up to this point. Yeah,
and I remember talking about it last year before the start of the season, just saying how much the running backs were going to have to carry and, be the catalyst of this offense. But obviously when obviously Journey Brown before the season. He's out due to the medical condition. And then you have Noah Cain go down on the first drive of the Indiana series. It almost didn't let them mold into the group that they should have been. And I think this year they have a really cool opportunity to do that, especially, and they're going to need to do that, especially because, number 14's got to step up. And we've talked about this time and time again. It's going to be how far can he take them, but at the same time, if the running back can take the pressure off him a little bit even, then he can at least be in the position more to make the right plays, and Yurcich can get him in the position to succeed. So those running backs are going to be not only critical for the offense, but just for the players on the offense specifically and making sure they succeed.
Absolutely. And as you just said, Sean Clifford's going to have a lot of tools to use. And obviously out wide, we return to the two top receivers from this program last season in Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington. As we said, Jahan Dotson has been very vocal in saying, listen, I'm the best there is in college football right now from the wide receiver position, and Parker Washington is right behind me. So they're confident. They're confident in their abilities. They're confident in this team. So that's going to be critical to watch as well, seeing them make plays on the outside and seeing what defenses do to adjust to them as well. They're going to have to adjust on the fly, become those leaders, and be leaders for the guys that are behind them, and see if they could get production as well, because this room is deep too.
I'm pretty sure you wrote something about it actually a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, but they're also going to have that third receiver step up.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of a subject for a couple of years now. Can Daniel George be someone who steps up? Cam Sullivan-Brown? But to me, from what they've been saying and what it seems like, Keandre Lambert-Smith has the potential to be that guy, and they really liked him in camp. And it's going to be a battle, but at the same time, Dotson and Washington not only are going to have to produce on the field, they're going to have to help these guys and help these young guys, because they, whether they want to be or not, like we call Dotson such a quiet leader, they have to lead by example, and they have to set the tone for these guys. And being able to get production from a third receiver like that would be something Penn State really hasn't had, I guess, since their Rose Bowl year with Godwin and Blacknall and all those guys. So it would really be just such a luxury for this team to have, something they haven't had in a few years.
Yeah, when I think of this third receiver position, I do think of, the days with Godwin, Deshaun Hamilton, Saeed Blacknall, and that really was a three-man rotation. And, Saeed Blacknall had a lot of breakout plays, especially in the
Wisconsin game,
in the Big Ten championship against Wisconsin. How many times did we see him just make exquisite runs down the field?
At least just being a downfield threat, just being that threat that's there. It can open up so much in the short game. We saw Parker Washington, how successful he was in the short game last year. If he can create that space across the middle for him, then Parker Washington could very well have a bigger year than Jahan Dotson. I don't think that's out of the question.
Yeah, I see that. Absolutely. And, you mentioned George as an option for this third receiver. I think that people have been expecting him to have a breakout season year after year after year, and he just hasn't been able to deliver. So I think that is, kind of chasing him in the back of his mind, that, that pressure. And I think that's giving guys like Keandre Lambert-Smith and Cam Sullivan-Brown an opportunity to step up and take that third position. But for me, as I was writing these pieces, examining, this spot, Keandre Lambert-Smith is somebody that stood out to me. He's athletic. He's got some starts under his belt, a couple starts last season, and he's very athletic, and he's definitely somebody that I think could take up that third receiver position. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Collegian Football Podcast. For Justin Morganstein, I'm Alexis Yoder, and we'll see you here next time.